Okay, so now we have acetyl-CoA. So what are we going to do with it? Well, now we go into the next step, and this is called the citric acid cycle, and this is an aerobic metabolism, so with oxygen. So the citric acid cycle is a series of reactions that connects to the intermediate acetyl-CoA from the metabolic pathways in stages 1 and 2, glycolysis, that occurred with the electron transport chain and the synthesis of ATP in stage 3. So this is the connector. So we're going to learn how to describe the oxidation of acetyl-CoA in the citric acid cycle. So the citric acid cycle is a central pathway in metabolism, and it uses the 2-carbon acetyl group in acetyl-CoA to produce carbon dioxide, which we exhale, NADH, and an extra hydrogen, as well as FADH2. And it's named for the citrate ion from citric acid, C6H8O7, which is a tricarboxylic acid, and this forms in the first reaction. And this is also known as the TCA cycle, tricarboxylic acid cycle, or the Krebs cycle. So there's 3 names, and they're all the same thing. Citric acid cycle, the TCA cycle, or the Krebs cycle, and they all refer to this reaction. So in the citric acid cycle, an acetyl group, which is 2 carbons, and an acetyl-CoA bonds to an oxaloacetate 4-carbon group to form citrate, which is 6 carbons. So remember, everything has to add and equalize out. Then 2 decarboxylation reactions remove carbon atoms from CO2 molecules to give succinyl-CoA, and this is 4 carbons. And then a series of reactions convert 4-carbon succinyl-CoA to oxaloacetate, and this combines with another acetyl-CoA, and the citric acid cycle starts all over again. So it's referred to as a cycle, right? And it's you can imagine it as the circle because it just keeps going round and round and round and round and round. And so you can see those are all the steps that we just talked about and how it keeps going and going and going. So speaking of the specific reactions, in reaction 1, this is when we form citrate. So the acetyl group, which again is 2 carbons from acetyl-CoA, bonds with the oxaloacetate 4-carbon group to yield citrate, and this is 6 carbons. Wrong. And you can see this here. You can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Reaction 2 is the isomerization or the reorganization to isocitrate. And so the citrate undergoes isomerization, or that reorganization that we talked about in the first part of the semester, to yield its isomer isocitrate. And this provides a secondary alcohol group that can be oxidized in the next reaction. Step 3 is then the oxidation in decarboxylation. So the secondary alcohol group in isocitrate is oxidized to a ketone and also produces hydrogen ions and electrons that reduce NAD plus to NADH and an extra hydrogen. And then a decarboxylation reaction converts a carboxylate group, which is the COO minus, to a CO2 molecule producing alpha ketoglutarate, and that's 5 carbons long. You can see those right there. Reaction 4 is the oxidation and decarboxylation. So alpha ketoglutarate undergoes decarboxylation to produce a 4-carbon compound that combines with CoA to form succinyl-CoA, and this is 4 carbons long. Then the hydrogens and the electrons that reduce NAD to NADH and H are going to happen, and you can see that we're producing more NADH. So then that can go down to the electron transport chain. Step 5 is hydrolysis. So then that succinyl-CoA is going to undergo a breaking reaction using water to break it, hydrolysis, and it's going to form succinate and CoA. So succinyl-CoA breaks apart to succinate and CoA. And then the energy released is used to add a phosphate group, which is that PI, an organic phosphate, to GDP, which is guanosine diphosphate, and this yields a GTP, which is guanosine triphosphate, and this is immediately converted to ATP. So it's very similar to ATP, but it's not exactly ATP, but it directly converts it to ATP. So then reaction 6 is going to be where hydrogen is removed from each of the 2 carbon atoms in the succinate, and this produces fumarate, and that's a compound with a trans carbon-carbon double bond. And 2 hydrogens are used to reduce the coenzymes FAD to FADH2. Okay, so the important part here is that we're producing NADH2 and taking more of those hydrogens down to the ETC. Reaction 7 is hydration, and this hydration reaction adds water to the double bond of fumarate to yield malonate, which is a secondary alcohol. Reaction 8 is going to be oxidation, and so that secondary alcohol group in malate is oxidized to a ketone, and this is going to form oxaloacetate, hydrogen ions, and electrons for the reduction of NAD+ to NADH and hydrogen. Then, basically, the overall reaction of the citric acid cycle, you can write it in one complete turn of the citric acid like this. You could have acetyl-CoA plus 3 NAD+, an FAD, GDP, PI, and 2 H2O, and it produces 2 CO2s, 3 NADHs, 3 H+, FADH2, an HS plus CoA, and a GTP. All right, so let's see what we learned. So how many of each are produced in one turn of the citric acid cycle? So pause me and come back. All right, in one turn of the citric acid cycle, we produce 2 CO2s, 3 NADHs, 1 FADH2, 1 GTP, and 1 CoA. All right, great job.